Hi, everybody. My name is Carmelita Lambera. I'm an intern at Wellness Workdays, and today I'm going to be going over foodborne illnesses and some memory tricks that I used to help me become familiar with them and to help me with the RD exam. So we'll go through each example. There's going to be some practice questions to also help us along the way. So feel free to take notes. I'm going to go ahead now and share my screen. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right in. So first is looking at prevention. According to the CDC, every year there's about 48 million Americans that get sick from foodborne illnesses, and around 128,000 are hospitalized. And that includes 3,000 people that unfortunately pass away from foodborne illnesses. There are the top 4 pathogens. They include Campylobacter, Salmonella, Listeria, monocytogenes, and E. coli. That's something you want to take a note of because it will be a question that's going to come up in just a minute. And there is some prevention that can help us with foodborne illnesses. There's 5 key pieces. The first is making sure that you're purchasing food from safe vendors. So sometimes if you're buying street food with questionable hygiene, you may not want to consume that. Also making sure that the food is cooked properly. So if food isn't cooked at the proper temperatures, that can cause pathogens. Holding food at the improper temperature. So if food is being held at a temperature that's too low, that can cause bacterial growth, or if you're holding it at a temperature for too long, which we'll take a closer look at in a couple of slides. Contaminated equipment. So if there's any kind of cross-contamination, unwashed surfaces are a few examples. And then going to the next one, poor hygiene. So if someone's not washing their hands, you want to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with warm water and soap. Those can be some reasons why bacteria can spread and can cause illnesses for people. Let's go ahead and take a look at a practice question. So here's our first question. Which of the following pathogens is the least significant contributor to foodborne illnesses in the US? So you have our choices to pick from here. We just looked at the top 4, and of the top 4, which one sticks out to you that wasn't listed in the last slide? Short-term memory question. And the correct answer would be D, Bacillus cereus. So once again, the top 4 is the Campylobacter, Salmonella, Listeria monocytogenes, and E. coli. Let's go ahead and take a look at another important piece for preventing foodborne pathogens. We're going to be looking at storage. So making sure that you store raw meat, poultry, fish, and eggs below ready-to-eat foods. One way to think about this is you wouldn't want it to be above the produce because let's pretend that some of the blood leaks, right? It's going to land on the vegetables. So you want it to be on the lower shelf so it doesn't land on anything. You also want to make sure that you store it in airtight containers and you keep it away from other raw and ready-to-eat foods. Refrigeration temperature is important, so making sure that it stays below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's going to be a temperature that you do want to memorize. Fruit and vegetables can stay safe between 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Meat, dairy, and eggs can stay safe between 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And frozen food should be kept between 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. With refrigeration, we want to pay attention to the length of time that the food is kept refrigerated. So for example, if we have something like bacon tends to be cured, or there tends to be like salts and some type of preservatives. So it can stay in the refrigerator for up to 7 days. Fresh, uncooked meat, so like poultry, ground meat, fish, and shellfish, can be kept in the refrigerator for up to 2 days. Cooked meats, like cooked chicken, can be kept for up to 4 days. And eggs in the shell can be kept for up to 5 weeks. If you take it out of the shell, then you want to consume it within about 4 days. And this is just a little note here about fish, and I think you could apply this to most raw meats too. If you're not going to eat it within a couple days, try to freeze it, and you could freeze it for up to 6 months, but the quality is probably best if you consume it within 3 months. So here's our next practice question. You open the refrigerator to see what you have available to make for dinner, and which of the following should be used first since it has the shortest recommended refrigerator time. So you have that bacon that you got 3 days ago, chicken thighs that you cooked 2 days ago, eggs in the shell that you got 1 week ago, or uncooked chicken breast that you got 2 days ago. Correct answer, D. So going back to what we just saw, the bacon you can keep for 7 days, the chicken thighs that are cooked you can keep for 4 days, the eggs in the shell you can keep for 5 weeks, and that uncooked chicken breast is on its last day, so you got to cook that up right now. When we're cooking our foods, we want to make sure that you're cooking it to the proper temperature. So meats like beef, pork, veal, lamb, ham, that rhymes, and fish should be cooked to about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's going to be on the lower end. The rest of the meats are going to have to be cooked at a higher temperature. So I try to categorize it in terms of like low to high or high to low, whatever works best for you. Tender cuts of the meat, like the backbone from the loin or the sirloin, can be cooked using frying, broiling, roasting methods. What's interesting about this is even when the meat is removed from the heat source, it still cooks. So we call that carry over cooking. And that occurs for about 10 minutes, and the temperature of the meat will rise up to 25 degrees. So if you have a steak that has an internal temperature of 130 degrees and you take it out and you let it sit for about 10 minutes, it's going to reach a temperature of at least 145 degrees, which we saw is a safe temperature for cuts of beef. Other types of meat need to be cooked at higher temperatures. For example, if it's ground meat or egg dishes, you want to cook that to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And poultry, you tend to want to cook higher, so that would be up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And this also applies to any leftovers and casseroles. Another note is when you have hot foods, make sure you keep them above 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and to keep the cold foods less than 41 degrees, which we saw earlier, but just another little reminder for you. So let's do another practice question. So here we have a 1.5 pound sirloin is roasted at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. Okay, that's interesting. But what's most important is internal temperature, right? So here it says it gets to 130 degrees. And they mentioned that it's going to be carved and served in 30 minutes. So 30 minutes is going to allow for some of that carry-over cooking that we just learned about. So let's take a look at our options. Can we serve this? Yes, because it reached the safe temperature in the oven. Yes, because of the carryover cooking. No, because of the carryover, or no, because of the E. coli. Answer is B, right? So it's a carryover cooking, allows for it to reach a healthy temperature or appropriate temperature. So if it's at 130 degrees and it warms up another 15 degrees minimum, that's going to reach the 145 degrees, which is a safe temperature for a sirloin. Now with leftovers, we want to make sure to store them properly, and that way they don't grow bacteria and you don't get sick. So make sure to keep foods at a safe temperature, and when you're preparing it to refrigerate, there is a two-step process. The first step would be to cool it from 135 degrees to room temperature in less than 2 hours. So if you leave it out for more than 2 hours, it can grow bacteria. And then once it's cooled to room temperature, you can place it in the refrigerator. If you were to place it in the refrigerator immediately, that can allow the middle center to stay cool. So that's why you want it to cool to room temperature first, and then you refrigerate it. So we've got another practice question for us. You cooked a casserole, it reached an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. What is not an appropriate action to take? So do we portion it and refrigerate it? Do we portion it and freeze it? Do we serve it immediately? or do we put it in an ice bath? So out of all these options, which one's not the best one to do? B, right? So we don't want to put it directly into the freezer because the center will remain uncooled, and then that can reach the danger zone for temperature. So you can serve it, you can portion it and refrigerate it, or place it in an ice bath. Let's take a look at our foodborne pathogens. So with this piece, I'm going to go through just some quick memory tips that help me. Feel free to use them if you think of something else that works better for you. Awesome. So salmonella, this one's kind of funny because salmonella, for me, it sounds like, salamanders. And you can actually find salmonella on reptiles. And so that, for me, it's stuck. So I have a fun saying, so salamanders prefer room temperature and can carry salmonella. S for 7 days. And this is one of the most common causes of foodborne illnesses, which we learned earlier, right? It was one of those top 4. The temperature here, it's going to be consistent with a lot of the foodborne pathogens. They grow within that danger zone. And food sources include raw meats, raw eggs, so like cookie dough, unwashed produce, contaminated water, and then the skin of reptiles and lizards, snakes. So you don't want to touch them and then eat right away. Right? You want to wash your hands. So you can start to experience symptoms in as early as 6 hours up to 48 hours. And some of the symptoms include fever. So that's one to keep in mind because not all of the foodborne pathogens cause fever, but salmonella does. It also causes diarrhea, abdominal cramps, headache, and it can last up to 7 days. So that's where that S comes into play. So in my mind, I just remember it causes fever along with all those other common ones, and it can last up to 7 days. Treatment, nothing major, just make sure to replace fluids and electrolytes, especially if you're having a lot of diarrhea. Not fun. Okay, this is a fun one to say. Campylobacter jejuni. I had to practice that one a little bit. But the memory trick for this one, for me, was camping then cramping. So I like to use that as an example because with this foodborne illness, you also find it in some of the similar foods as salmonella, but for me, it could just remind me of camping because some of these things can happen while you're camping, right? You could have undercooked meat without realizing it because a lot of times we don't have food thermometers when we're camping, right? Unpasteurized milk products, contaminated water. So in my mind, that just kind of made sense. And in terms of the onset, 2 to 5 days after exposure. And I thought about it in terms of camping too, right? Like how long do we normally camp for? Maybe a weekend, at least for me, I'm not a big camper. So that helped me remember that piece. And with this one, you get the fever as well. Diarrhea with blood, well, that's something unique. So you might want to just keep in mind that symptom along with the stomach cramps and pain. And this is going to be similar, just making sure to replace fluids and electrolytes and let the illness pass. Shingella, if I said that right. So this one, I know it's a bad word, shit. And with this one, it reminded me of stool, right? So poop, and surfaces. So this is going to be one that will pass on from like fecal matter. So it's from improper hygiene. So you'll find this in restrooms and surfaces, even toys. Wow. So making sure to wash your hands and then making sure to also wash surfaces, especially if you're preparing food that isn't going to be cooked, because cooking would naturally kill some of this bacteria, especially since this one, it's at a lower temperature, from 50 to 104 degrees. So cooking would burn it, but if you're not cooking it, then you can get sick. And symptoms for this take on within 12 hours, up to 50 hours, or maybe helps to think 48. This one is going to provide or cause abdominal pain, watery diarrhea with blood, mucus, fever, nausea, vomiting. So for this one, you'd also want to make sure to replace electrolytes and fluids. E. coli. This one I remembered because it starts with E, and coli is everywhere, and it lasts up to 8 days. It's also one of the top 4 pathogens. This one grows between 39 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And food sources, like I said, it's everywhere. It's in the soil, it's in the manure, it's in the water, it's in your salads. Raw food, undercooked meat, unpasteurized milk. And so for this one, what you're going to want to do is make sure to wash your hands, and you'll start to experience symptoms for this within 3 to 8 days. So that's why the E is for up to 8 days. And this one causes profuse watery diarrhea and blood, not pleasant, and then vomiting, abdominal cramping. So really making sure to pay attention to your fluids and electrolytes. Most people recover within a week, but people who are immune compromised, like young children and elderly, are at greater risk. So they might end up being hospitalized. And that's why you'll see a lot of like food recalls for E. coli. Here's another fun one, Vibrio parahemolyticus. I had to practice that one too. So this one I remembered because it starts with a V, and I just thought, hey, I went on vacation, I ate raw oysters, and I started vomiting. So with this one, you're going to find it at a lower temperature, like 68 to 95 degrees. So kind of like that ideal vacation temperature, right? When you're on the beach, enjoying your time off. And this one you're going to find in the coastal waters, mud, marine animals like oysters. And the onset is within 16 hours. And this also causes watery diarrhea, cramping, nausea, vomiting, fever. And this one also gives you chills. So they can keep that one in mind. Treatment, similar to some of the other previous ones, is replacing electrolytes and fluids. Listeria monocytogenes. Listeria L, late reaction. So this one doesn't have an onset within like minutes or hours. It takes about a week or two. So you also will find this in milk products, especially unpasteurized milk products. So that's how I remember this one. And it's also one of the top 4 pathogens. This grows within that danger zone, 34 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And food sources include the soil, most moist environments, animals, feces, unwashed produce. Here's the milk products, cured meats, but cheese, raw milk, the poultry, seafood are also common food sources for this one. And for the onset, you'll see it takes up to 4 weeks. So it's kind of a long time, right? So you may have eaten this and then 4 weeks later, totally forgotten about it. This one causes fever, but it also causes some other different symptoms like the stiffness or the headache and confusion, and then, diarrhea. Meningitis. So I also remembered monocytogenes, meningitis. This can happen in immune deficient people and babies, neonates. Treatment for this is antibiotics. So you'd have to go to a doctor to get that treatment. Next one we have is Staphylococcus aureus. So staph is a skin bacteria, so I just remembered that. And then aureus, I just remembered it's around 30 minutes. So this one takes on a quick onset. It grows between 70 to 97 degrees Fahrenheit. And food sources for this one include like desserts, salads, baked goods, products with mayonnaise, reheated foods high in protein are a few examples. And this one, you'll experience symptoms in as little as 30 minutes up to 7 hours. And this one causes nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach cramps. So no fever for this one. And similar to the other ones, working on replacing fluids and electrolytes, especially with the vomiting and the diarrhea. Next one we have is Clostridium botulism. I hope I said that right. So for this one, botulism, most of you might already know this, but Botox is a very popular practice that people do so that their face muscles don't move and they think they look younger. Some people would argue otherwise. But the weakness of botulism also starts in the muscle nerves around your face. So that's one of the first key pieces for this one. And then I also remembered B for badly canned food. So you're going to see this foodborne illness or pathogen in canned foods. You'll also see it in honey, especially for children less than a year old, and it's found naturally in the soil. The onset for this one is about 4 to 36 hours, so there's kind of a larger range for that one. And it causes nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps as well. Causes double vision, blurred vision, drooping eyelids, slurred speech, difficulty swallowing, dry mouth, muscle weakness. So these are some of the key Distinctions between this foodborne illness and other ones. Treatment for this is taking the antitoxin. They'd also have to go to the doctors or go to the hospital. This one can be fatal. So think about it, your cranial nerves, that's like major, right? So definitely get help if you think you have this one. The next one is going to be similar to this, but a little different. So it's Clondiserum perfringens. So this one's going to be a little bit more popular. It's one of the most common causes of foodborne illnesses. They also call this the cafeteria bug. So you'll see that show up in the exam. This one grows at higher temperatures, between 109 to 117 degrees Fahrenheit. And the food sources include intestines of humans, animals, and soil, meat products, especially gravies and soups, improperly cooked foods or reheated foods are also going to be common sources. And the symptoms for this can be also pretty quick. It takes about 8 to 18 hours for you to start to feel the symptoms. And you'll experience mostly diarrhea and stomach cramping for this one. So no fever. And something that's kind of interesting, if it helps you remember, it causes gas gangrene, which doesn't sound fun. And treatment, antimicrobial drugs like penicillin, be utilized for this one. Next, we have Bacillus cereus. And this one I remembered because it looks like the last part of it, cereal. And it's also known as a fried rice syndrome. So you're going to find this one mostly in grains, and it also grows within that danger zone. So you find it on soil, dust, grains, improperly stored rice products, starchy foods, casseroles, and sauces. Symptoms occur within 6 to 15 hours, and this one causes nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Treatment, it's pretty mild. Most people recover, and they just rest, stay hydrated. So, some people don't even go to the doctors for this one. Streptococcus. This one I remembered because I think of strep throat, right? So sore throat. This one grows between 50 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And food sources include your skin and your throat. It's also found on milk, eggs, potato salad, foods held at room temperature for too long, poor hand hygiene. And the onset for this one is within 2 to 6 hours, so this is pretty quick. And you'll experience sore throat, fever, upper respiratory infection. So something to just really remember, because this one's different from a lot of the other ones. And treatment, most people recover within 24 hours. And our last one is norovirus. And so this is like the flu virus. And I just remembered no for no cooking when sick. So this one's the most common cause of vomiting and diarrhea. And it grows between 32 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Food sources and intestines, any food that's not cooked after touched, because it just spreads. Kind of like Shingella, right? Stool surfaces. And this one occurs within 24 to 48 hours after exposure, and this causes the whole shebang: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, headache, body aches. So usually you just want to treat the symptoms. Most people recover within 1 to 3 days. All right, let's start wrapping it up with some practice questions. So we're going to put this all together just with a couple of questions. So here we have a patient, they have a fever, abdominal pain, diarrhea after 24 hours, and they were consuming raw poultry, and they're on day 6 of feeling ill. So which illness did they get? So looking at all of these, correct answer is A, salmonella. So, right, salmonella causes fever. Onset is 6 to 48 hours and can last up to 7 days. And the food sources are raw, undercooked meat. E. coli doesn't cause fever. Campylobacter jejuni occurs within 2 to 5 days. And the Bacillus cereus is found in grains, not in meat. So that's like one way to kind of use the memory tricks. So you can eliminate things based on some of those little tricks that we learned. Next question. So you got a cookout, there's ground lamb burgers, and they're on the grill, and they're 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So we just learned that ground meat needs to be heated up more than non-ground meat. Okay. So what's going to happen? Are they infected with the Vibrio parahemolyticus? Was it cooked to a safe internal temperature? Is there going to be carryover cooking? Or are they infected with the Campylobacter jejuni? D, they're infected with the Campylobacter jejuni because they weren't heated to the right temperature. Ground meat needs to be heated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And some of the other foodborne pathogens that could have occurred would have been like the Salmonella, Campylobacter jejuni, or E. coli. The carryover cooking occurs, but in this question, they didn't mention that it was going to be set aside for those 10 minutes. It sounded like they were just going to serve it right away. So that's something to really remember for the exam, paying attention to what the process. Are they going to serve it right away, or are they going to let it sit for a little bit? And then last, the Vibrio parahemolyticus is caused by raw or undercooked seafood, not lamb. So that's how that helps you remember. Cool. Well, that is the end of my tricks and tips for foodborne pathogens. Thank you for watching, and I wish everybody the best of luck.